So welcome to this CAPE conversation, which is all about the things that matter for people managers. And I am really pleased to be joined here today by Chris Golby and James Cole. So my name's Lindsay Kitchen and I'm one of the directors here, and I'll get Chris and James to introduce themselves in a moment. But just to let you know about the webinar platform that we're using today, you have the option to ask questions by putting them in the question box, or you can raise your hand as well if you wanted to come on camera at the end when we're asking questions and answering them. I think you've got reaction buttons as well that you can use if you want to. And as I said, we are recording this, so we will be able to share that with you. So this webinar is all about helping people managers feel more confident with using AI. And wherever you are in terms of your AI journey, we want to meet you there. So you might be somebody who's using tools a lot and you have done for a while, and you're looking at how you can continue to do that. Or you could be somebody who actually is very much at the start of their journey and feeling a little apprehensive, not knowing how and where the benefits of using AI might be for you and your team. And that's why we've got here these two wonderful guests, just to have a really informal conversation about AI, the myths, the benefits, the tools that really matter, and what you can take away here is maybe one step to help build your confidence and build your impact with using these tools. So first of all, James, would you like to tell us a little bit about you and your business?
Yeah, hi Lindsay, hi everyone. First of all, Lindsay, thanks very much for having me on this webinar today. Really pleased to be involved. So my name's James Cole. I'm the founder and chief executive of Panache Cruises. We're the seller of luxury and ultra luxury cruises. We operate in the UK and the US. We started the business in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. So it's been a very interesting but really good journey that we've been on over the last 4 years. We've expanded quite quickly. We're now a team of around about 70 of us, split by 60 people in the UK and 10 people in the US. We absolutely focus on our people. People are absolutely centric to what we do. We look after our people really, really well, who look after our customers, who in turn look after our cruise line partners. So yeah, really excited about this conversation today, and thanks again for the invite, Lindsay.
Wonderful, thanks James. Yeah, and just as we were talking at the start, I asked James what's his favourite 3 cruises, so we'll maybe share those with you after as well, and send you some links if you fancy a voyage out there. But yeah, thank you for making the time, James, to join us as well. And Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your work as well?
Yeah, hi Lindsay, and to echo James, thanks for having us on this morning as well. Really great to be on and be able to talk about these things. So my name's Chris. I'm one of the founders at Lumion. So we really help companies navigate the complexities of culture within organizations. So we look at help companies gathering data around the organization, from interviews and workshops to our own software platforms. But where we really make a difference is working with the organizations to report that back to them, and working with CEOs like James and HR leads to be able to understand what's needed within the organization and really drive forward some great high growth cultures in different organizations, and the fantastic culture they've got over at Panache Cruises as well.
Yeah, wonderful. So yeah, it's Chris that introduced me to James and talked about the work that they've been doing there. And Chris and I, we've connected over the last few years with, I guess, a sort of aligned passion for helping organisations really thrive and putting people at the heart of it, but also making it easier for people to see what's happening across their organisations as well. And that's really, I guess, why I thought about you straight away in terms of how you brought together technology and people, and using that to help businesses really get insights and change the way that maybe this has been done over the years as well?
Of course, yeah. So my background, I originally did a lot within digital health, so working with the NHS. And one of the big things we always said was, you don't want to replace the doctor or the nurse within the process. It's not a financial transaction, it's a people-to-people transaction. But what you can do is replace the more monotonous tasks from the technology. So we don't want doctors and nurses messing around on Excel, trying to capture data patterns or trying to understand it or trying to chase people for responses. What we want people to be doing is concentrating on what they're good at and what they can deliver on. So when it comes to that culture piece and understanding technology, I think particularly when it comes to people, then it's about creating that middle ground. So where we can slot in and help with the people side of things and drive that forwards. And I think AI is a really powerful tool in helping us to achieve that. It's really jumped that on a step in the fact that it is, it's not just AI that's appeared, it's generative AI, which is a difference. AI has been around for years, but it's the ability to almost communicate backwards and forwards with us that's been missing. So that current advancement in that area has allowed us to understand and communicate with machines that's not just through computer language or machine language. And so we're able to communicate with AI. And I think that gives us a real powerful way to back up some of the more people-oriented functions in organizations.
Yeah. And what you just touched on there is some of the terminology that now can be a bit confusing for leaders and managers in businesses. So that generative AI, tell us a little bit more about what that means.
Yeah, sure. So that's about the large language models that have come into existence. So a big thing, AI has been around in some form since realistically the 1950s. We had Turing tests, things like that coming out of Bletchley Park. The Turing test is, can you distinguish it from a real human? Which is a very simple test back years ago. And I remember learning that on my original undergraduate degree years ago. So it's been there, it's been around, but we've never had really ways of communicating with it properly. And it's only really through the birth of what OpenAI have done in the last couple of years, realistically, that have propelled AI forwards. And it's just that ability to communicate naturally back and forth. So we don't have to communicate with machines effectively through code. So it's always been computer scientists that have done that. Whereas now we've got generative AI, which is allowing us to do things with low code, no code versions that allow us to communicate back and forth quite quickly, build things and really propel things forwards. And at the moment, it's all about imagination within AI, I think.
And that's why I guess it's become more accessible to people who, aren't computer scientists, who don't write code, and the likes of us and, James, in your business, we can now, have far more accessibility and ease of use, I guess. However, some of the statistics out there, just to sort of set the scene. So Adecco Group did a global report this year, and it was 2,000 C-suite executives. And they said that 57% of them lack confidence in their leaders' skills and knowledge in relation to AI. So that's, nearly 60% don't think that their leaders and managers have the college, the confidence or the knowledge. And that then conversely, in a LinkedIn Workplace Learning report, 4 out of 5 employees want to know more about AI and how they can use it in their work. So we've got this gap between employees wanting to do more and know more, but leaders actually not yet where they need to be to support that. James, does that resonate with you in terms of maybe some of the businesses you work with and how things feel in your own organisation?
Yeah, I think the whole subject of AI, if you're not careful, it can be really confusing and it can be intimidating, can't it? With all the terminology that's used, and a lot of people will use flash terminology just to try and show off and think that they know everything that's going on within certain sectors, and AI is probably one of those key ones at the minute. for me, from a business point of view, it comes down to how can you use technology to aid customer service? How can you use technology to aid improving relationships with your people? How can you use AI to give you solutions across your whole business? So, if you use something simple in our business, like an invoice coming in from a cruise line and matching it to data that we've got on our system, you can do that by an individual, but that's obviously human effort. It is open to interpretation. It's open to mistakes. But if you implement some form of technology or AI, and you have something that matches that invoice automatically and can feed back information on what might be missing or where there's discrepancies, then suddenly it comes alive then, doesn't it? It's a solution to a common business issue. And that's what AI is all about to me. It's about, helping us improve processes, helping us improve people management, helping us improve customer service, and it's just trying to bring it alive into a day-to-day business environment.
Yeah, all about improving those sticky areas that we know can fall, into slowing things down, and as you say, impacting customer experience and relationships that we need to have at work to really get, I guess, high performance. So James, how did you build your knowledge and your capabilities, perhaps personally, but also how are you doing that as a business?
Yeah, good question, Lindsay. Like I say, I think it comes back to, just thinking about how can we improve things? What is our issue? What are our head scratching moments in our business? And how can we use technology to improve those? So, I'm a big fan of using technology and AI to improve customer service, but not replace it. So, I know if you push AI to its limits, people will say, oh, it'll replace people who sell cruise holidays, or it'll replace all your copy that you'll ever write. I'm not quite so sure that's ever going to be the case, certainly for our business. But there's opportunities to improve things, to aid customer service, to aid process management, to potentially reduce some costs in the business. But it works alongside humans within the business who can add creativity, who can add a personality to certain things, and it can work alongside different areas. So I think it's just a question for us anyway of finding those head scratching moments. What are the real issues in our business? And then doing some research, speaking to experts, so from a cultural point of view, we speak to Chris and his team at Lumion, and they find a solution that has AI integrated into it that will make our culture better in the longer term. So that's how we've tended to approach these things from a more business perspective, but using AI as part of that solution, and engaging with experts in the area to make sure we implement a solution in the correct way.
So find the business challenge, business problem that aligns with where you want to go in your strategy, or what data you're gathering around the sort of performance, and then look at what the solutions are, and AI being one of them, rather than perhaps when somebody might go to what's the shiny new thing, and then how do I put that into the business? It's the other way around. Chris, what are your thoughts on this, about how organisations and individuals can really upskill themselves?
It's funny to hear you say that about a solution trying to find a problem, is what we always used to talk about. That happens an awful lot in technology. You'd be surprised. I really like James's point of the human in the loop. That's what we always try to talk about. At the moment, AI is not clever enough to be left to its own course, and so we need to keep a human in the loop. I think the least at-risk job by AI at the moment is a counsellor, because it's such a human-to-human connection, and it's the one thing we probably shouldn't be replacing and trying to replicate in some way. And I think James is right on the customer service element of it. It's that human-to-human connection that's so important, and we don't want to miss. But it's the removal of those bits underneath. I think it's interesting you talk about the CEOs and whether people are prepared for it or not prepared for it, or whether they're learning the right skills or not learning the right skills. And to me, I think the problem I have there is with the actual question itself, in whether it's the right skill set being learned, because the way it was best described to me is that we often see AI as a new tool or as sort of a dot-com boom. But realistically, what we're looking at is almost similarity to the discovery of electricity. We don't know what it is we can do with it yet, and we don't know how far it's going to go. So how on earth can you train people in something where society doesn't even know where it's going to go itself? How can you tell the skill set's going to be there in the first place? How can you go there? So you're much better off doing it in the way that James said at the moment, which is finding out the problems and then seeing if it can be solved through AI, but not just embedding AI for the purpose of getting AI because you feel you need to be trained in the skill sets of it, and almost moving through that kind of scaremongering pattern. You want to be looking at ways of, can it identify a problem? If it can't, it's not the only thing out there. There are other tools and other ways of doing things that you can move to. But I think keeping a human in the loop is quite critical there. Probably the other thing to note is there's going to be stages of AI development. And particularly we're in a very early stage of replacing sort of particularly monotonous tasks. So when I say things like data collection, there are obvious ones to be replaced. There's the second phase that's predicted called agentic AI, which is the emergence of agents and that ability to control people who can do small functional jobs by themselves. And I think the thing I always say there is that's the bit people get a little bit intimidated by, because it's a thought of whether it replace me. But I think where we will move to is that premise of it's not one person doing a job that's monotonous, it's one person controlling 10 agents. So that will be the next phase we almost move on to, is how we control those agents. So I think for now, we want to keep a human in the loop, replace those monotonous tasks, get that going, but be aware of the shift of where technology is going in the future, knowing we might not be there for a couple of years. I mean, that exponential curve is quite scary at the moment, but there's a few things to probably think about there and what to prepare for. Is we shouldn't be thinking, do I have the skill set to handle today what's going to be changed tomorrow?
Yeah, so it's that actually thinking ahead and I guess thinking wider than what might be, an immediate concern. And you use that word scaremongering. And I think that's where, when we come to what's holding people back, or what are people most worried about, or what's stopping people from getting started, it's that fear. And there's a question in the Q&A about, as leaders, we might know that we're not trying to replace people with AI, but how do we message and communicate that in a way that allows the people that we work with not to worry about it? People generally don't like uncertainty, and AI brings that uncertainty because we don't know what we don't know yet about that future growth. So, James, what would you say in relation to that? How do we help alleviate people's concerns around potential threats to their roles?
Well, if we use the most well-known app out there, ChatGPT, you might think that's the end of the copywriters in our business, for example. I can just type in, give me 1,000 words on Regent Seven Seas, and Bob's your uncle. There you go. There's 1,000 words of copy. But I think we know it doesn't work that way. Chat GPT is absolutely fantastic in terms of perhaps giving you some ideas for your copy, perhaps giving you a first draft of things, but you definitely need to put your own spin on things. You need to absolutely sanity check that the quality's there, because if you put rubbish in, you're going to get rubbish out. So where's the AI tool getting the raw information from? So I think you can absolutely use, in my example, ChatGPT to write more copy, because you can use it as a base to do some research and help the copywriter. But that copywriter can only write in their own language, in their own creative way and put their own personal slant on it. So, you know, from our point of view, we now have more copywriters than we would have done previously. They're just churning out more copy than they've done before with the help of ChatGPT. So it's helping, it's not hindering or replacing them. It's helping them with their role and helping them be a you know, write better copy.
It's this alignment, isn't it? It's with, not or, and it's that ability for us to maybe and you know, this is maybe one of the advantages that I've sort of picked up in my research. It just helps you get started. It helps, you know, that moving past a blank page and procrastination, it helps you make that start. But then that shouldn't be the end point. Then there still is this need for, you know, humans to sense check and to you know, really get output to a place of what's needed. And indeed, I've read about the fact that AI can hallucinate and can imagine things. Now, Chris, is that something that is real? And, you know, in terms of James's example there, you know, what should we be doing in our use of AI tools in regard to that?
The ghost in the code. It can have hallucinations. I mean, it's becoming rarer that they pop up. And obviously it's improving over time. It'd be hard for me to sit here and say what the exact data is behind that. I'm waiting to see more of the outcomes. I'm sure that we'll be investigating more and more over time, but it's more about how the AI learns in the first place and how those large language models are structured. Something I was going to mention about James's point there is about education being particularly important with the workforce, and going through what's needed, but also the change management, and realizing that just because as a leadership team you've jumped on this and tried to do something, it doesn't mean the employees have been brought on that journey with you from the early stages. So it's important that they know the why things are happening in the first place. And I always use the analogy, you know, a drill didn't replace 10 guys with a screwdriver. A digger didn't replace 10 people with shovels, for instance. That's not what happened. We just learned different ways of doing our jobs. And I think different ways can be often the thing that we're missing, because often when we think about jobs, we think AI will just do them faster or quicker, but they seem to do them at poorer quality because they're doing them faster and quicker. And what we're often not thinking about is the way we can change our jobs. So one of the things, particularly with copywriting, is idea generation. So that ability to capture multiple ideas, and that's never really been done before. You'd have to go out the office and speak to multiple people and gather that information. And I think that's really critical, and it's something that's not really been done before. But also one that often gets mixed. We talk about productivity in terms of increased rate, but we don't talk about performance enough in terms of quality. I think AI is not used enough to check quality of things. How much are we using it to do QA, basically? How much are we using it to do that quality assurance checks, to be able to go over and see what's happening and check things that maybe wouldn't have been spotted? And that's one thing to pull in and look at and say, okay, well, we're all thinking AI will replace our jobs or do them faster, but we could supplement it in different ways by changing our jobs, by tweaking them, the way we move, the way we go from pillar to post, basically. How do we do that, and how do we move forwards with that? And I know, as I alluded to at the start, the main limitation of AI at the moment is going to be our own creativity to use it. That's going to be the biggest hindrance up front.
Yeah, so actually, go on, James.
No, I was just going to say, and our creativity shouldn't be limited to cost savings, because that's what seems to happen sometimes when a new technology comes in or a new way of working. And I'll use overseas call centers as a perfect example here. You know, when that came in probably 20 years ago, you know, banks and utility companies flocked to use overseas call centers, but not in the right way, just in any way, because it was deemed as a great cost saving. And it might have saved them pound notes, but I don't necessarily think it saved them in the long term, because, you know, look how many banks, look how many utility companies are now bringing their call centres, especially customer-centric ones, back to the UK, you know. So, you know, whenever a new technology comes in, and we're talking about AI here, it's as Chris alludes to, it's how you use it, and, you know, not abuse it. And you make sure you're using it to aid your customer service or aid your people management rather than replace it, because that's a very lazy but easy way of using technology, by, you know, seeing it as a cost-cutting tool. And sometimes that's just not the right way to go, is it?
I think it's that shift, isn't it? And I recognise this from, you know, in previous organisations I worked in, that it was all about efficiency and improving processes. And you got that, you know, do you automate something in the sort of early forms of automation? Do you outsource? Do you offshore? Whereas now I think the switch is around actually not the process, but the customer journey, and looking at things at a customer journey level, or indeed an employee journey, and then seeing actually where are the improvements we can make, and how can we be creative, as you said there, around what those improvements might look like. But the truth is, we've really been using AI across all of our roles, and many managers and leaders might say, I don't use AI, but they have, because there's things like emails going to junk boxes, there's spell check. You know, what other things have we been using in terms of AI that's helped us that maybe we don't realise?
Gosh, that's a good question.
Yeah. Again, from our business point of view, you know, there's things like automated processes that might link one marketing channel with another, so it moves data from one place to another in a two-way format, and there's some intelligence used there. That's definitely something that automates emails. You've just touched on, Lindsay. So we might have a sequence of emails that go out, and again, there's some intelligence in there about, you know, the type of email that goes to a certain customer. You know, there's some sort of learning that happens there. You know, there's all sorts of different things. Like you say, I think everything seems to have come to life from, you know, the promotion around the likes of, you know, in the common environment with the likes of Chat GPT.
Yeah, and Chris, where do you see it being used?
I think you've got basic chatbots and things like that have been around a little while. As I said, it's really only been the last couple of years that it's been really generative AI and that ability to communicate back and forwards with this. But generative AI is built on the back of other models, and particularly machine learning has been in the biggest advancements over the last 10 to 15 years. And that would have been going on more in the background than probably people realized. So particularly when you look at companies like Microsoft and Google, they'd have been using machine learning to quite a heavy level. Particularly understand marketing patterns, sales patterns, how you use general Microsoft products. There's all sorts of things going on in the background that's allowed that big data to be built up to push forwards to the generative AI pockets. So it's probably more things that have been going on in the background, and you haven't realized that that's where the underlying technology sits. The generative AI is only the communication tool with that on top. That sits on top of it effectively, but it's all the stuff in the background that's been going on for years, and the research into those areas that's really driven it forward. So as I said before, it's been around. It's been around in our day-to-day lives for years. We've just not been communicating with it. It's like the channel's suddenly been turned on, that we realise what's actually happening there and the power behind it.
Yeah, so yeah, it's nothing to be afraid of, because we've been using it and it's been helping us in our roles for quite some time. So if you were a manager or leader that you wanted to, you know, take the next step and think about, you know, how can you do more, how can you learn more? And maybe we start from the place of, you know, what are our biggest pain points? For example, let's say recruiting. So we know, you know, the recruitment process as a manager can be quite intensive in terms of the amount of time, and also in terms of, you know, the quality of the candidates that you get in. What would, you know, how could, you know, AI work in that instance? Maybe what have you seen, or what would be your experiences?
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, from my point of view, I think, Lindsay, that you know, start with a Google search. You know, start with what is your issue, and you know, where can AI help you? It is literally that simple. You know, don't be scared. You know, there's a lot of terms out there that will scare you. You know, the fact that it's a cutting edge technology will scare a lot of people. It scared me. But you know, there's some very simple solutions. There's some very simple apps. You know, if you take Grammarly, which is something that we use that's out there, it just basically reads your text that's been written by somebody. So has it been plagiarized? Is the grammar, you know, in a reasonable state? Do the sentences make sense? It's just another sanity check out there, isn't it? So, you know, you can use all sorts of different things. I mean, personally, I've not really used any sort of AI from a recruitment point of view, if I'm being honest, Lindsay. But I think, you know, if I was to do that, I would just go on to something like Google and ask for that, ask the question and see what comes back.
I was going to say, it's about being on that journey, isn't it? So how we bring our people along on that journey with us. So realistically, we're at the very early stages of AI, as I spoke about earlier, and what it's going to do. That analogy of the electricity is perfect because we don't know yet what's going to happen. There's a bunch of initial excitement, and then it will drop off for a little while, and then there'll be a stage of innovation where things start to move, things start to pull together and advance it onto the next stage. And I think I know there's a question in the chat about creativity and how to push that forward. And I think we have to think about creativity, but also think about innovation. So how we're doing that and how we're pulling people along on that journey with us. And I think that comes back to the earlier point of it's about education and about change management. So how we take people on that journey and how we work. So I suppose at the end of the day, quite simply put, it's about trying it out. It's just experimenting, trying it out, giving space to innovate, giving that, importantly, that psychological safety that teams need in order to be able to innovate and become creative. So you encourage that better psychological safety and encourage people to come up with ideas, to bring ideas to the table. And that's when you'll really get things propelled forwards. But I suppose don't expect now the world to light up overnight. It's going to be there's going to be probably a little bit of a lull now before some of the bigger innovations come along in this space. But it's a case of starting to see probably how you can focus on some of the replacement of those more monotonous tasks at the moment until the more advanced AI tools come along.
So when you say that psychological safety, this is all around giving people that ability to play and to fail, to get things wrong, to try stuff out, to ask questions, you know, to almost have that permission to do that. I've read about where some organisations have said actually they have a no AI policy because they're worried about the ethical concerns around the impact of AI, or maybe the sort of the data risk elements, thinking about GDPR or you know, people cyber security. Where do you think we sit in terms of this balancing the risks of AI, some of those that I talked about, versus that ability to play and innovate and try? How do you manage that, James, as a business, or how do you know, have you heard others that get past that?
Yeah, I think that's a genuine concern, isn't it, with AI, about how intelligent it gets, the security side of it. You know, you hear I've heard stories about, you know, people giving AI access to internal documents and things like that, and being able to find out somebody's salary in the business. You know, examples of security concerns like that. But again, with anything, you've just got to be careful, haven't you? You've just got to, if you don't know what you're doing, speak to somebody who does. You know, tread carefully. Make sure you do your research. You know, you be careful with what you're doing in existing business practices. If you bring in a new business practice in, you need to understand it and be careful, don't you? So yeah, I think there's definite concerns there, Lindsay, but you would have concerns whatever new business practice you're bringing into your organisation.
Yeah, so it's being aware of the risk, looking at how you manage it, look at how you balance the business case, as you say, with any other change. Yeah, Chris, from your perspective as well, what are the risks and how should we manage them and approach them as leaders?
Yeah, I think that analogy of the electricity suits here as well, doesn't it? So it's pretty dangerous electricity, but I think any company who ignored it would be to their own detriment. And I think, there can be negative sides to everything. It has to be used in a trusting way. I think the two things that always stand out are data privacy and ethics. So particularly in terms of the data privacy, like James said, I've heard of stories of people sending in all their accounts and all their management accounts into the AI tools and then becoming live and available. I would say if you're just using the chatbots, the ChatGPT, Gemini, the tools like that, then I would not be sending any private information. I'd be making sure everything's anonymized and just think about what it is you're sending in. I suppose think about what you would effectively stand in the street and be prepared to shout out loud about. We all know what we're prepared to tell people publicly and what we would keep behind us, and have that common sense. When you're doing it the same way, you're effectively publicly speaking to everybody. No one's going to stand at a conference and tell everyone their credit card details, are they? So probably don't type it into Gemini at the same time. It's probably a risk. And then the other one is just the ethics of it. Again, if you think about it, almost a public speaking term. What is it you're communicating back and forth with? What are you training your own AI tools in? What are you looking at? What do you want the world to be effectively in terms of what you're putting into it? So have some nuance around the ethics and think about that side of things. But I suppose that'll probably be my biggest piece of advice, actually, is think of it as if you're public speaking, not one-on-one speaking. What are you prepared to give out to a wider audience? And what would you want to hold back, or what would you not want to say? And that's the way I'd be communicating with the tools.
Yeah, that's a really useful way of thinking about it, isn't it? It's like, what would you be prepared to say out to the public, and recognizing that is then readily accessible information. And so many organizations now are starting to get AI policies developed, aren't they, to help create a bit of structure and a framework to how they use it. And probably that would be a suggestion as well for managers and leaders, is to ask, what is the policy, what are they able to do with their team, linking to that educate piece and around, is there a test area that you can try stuff on that is safe and that the risks have been managed in, so that you're not holding back and not doing anything because of a perceived risk there. So let's think about then two aspects for the sort of the next 5-10 minutes that we're together here, for managers, for leaders. So the practical side of what they should do, and things that they can start looking at. And then we'll come on to actually what might they need to do in terms of their own development and their own growth to support that. So let's start with the practical side. So what tools would you be recommending, or what resources would you signpost people to do as practical things that they could take away? James, from your perspective, what sort of practical things would you recommend?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, the practical things for me are thinking about what are your head-scratching moments in your business. What issues do you need to solve? Where could you streamline things? Where do you need help with your processes? Let's go back to thinking about what most business owners are really good at, is thinking about their business and thinking about the problems in their business without even thinking about AI. So where are those issues? Every business owner can do that and will know their issues. And then doing some research about where can AI and the tools surrounding AI can help them. Whether that's process related, whether that's cost related, whether that's people related, whether that's customer service related. So for an example of that might be in my business, that we're open from 9 till 7 every single day. But between 7 p.m. and 9 a.m., we've not got anybody on our chat facility. Now, we always have a human on our chat during opening hours, but undoubtedly there's an opportunity for us to have some kind of chatbot in out of hours that's better than not having anybody, that at least sets people's expectations of when we're reopening, can answer very, very basic questions. That's better than us just not being available at all, isn't it? So, I would then go and research that, literally starting with Google or speaking to some colleagues or somebody who's had experience of it before, finding some potential solutions, researching some of the pitfalls of putting these tools live, as we've discussed about security and making sure that, we're only giving the app access to what we want it to have, and then putting it live in some test environment, giving it a thorough testing, and then putting it live. So that's the sort of process I would start to go through. Start with your business, start to find the issues, and then work on the solution.
Thank you, James. Yeah, so really that focus in on what's the business problem. And Chris, what would you recommend in terms of practical things that managers can do?
I think there's a bit of an educational bit here how the technology stack is structured. So there's tools out there like Gemini and like ChatGPT, or you can type in marketing AI tool or sales AI tool, or whichever AI tool. I'm sure you can find it for pretty much anything you look at. A holiday AI tool. But what effectively it is there's a base level technology, which is particularly the OpenAI, and that's been built on top of effectively. So there's a base layer of tools here. So whenever you're looking at a particular marketing AI tool or a sales AI tool, all that's happened there is that there's someone who spent a long time almost separating out a block of an AI tool and training that one particular tool to respond in a certain way to what it is you need. So ChatGPT and Gemini are tools that have been separated out and built on top of, just with millions of people inputting and outputting lots of information. And all they are chatting back and forth, Gemini chatting back and forth. The marketing tool, its blocks are all anyone ever talks to about is marketing. And it has priority to the team who built it, who give it the most of its marketing knowledge. And it's bracketed out in that way. So you can even build tools that I've seen people build them that respond like it is that individual person. So you can say to it, I would say this, I wouldn't say this, and you can almost branch it off and have that separate AI tool. So when you're thinking about which AI tools to access, just bear that in mind, that they're just pockets that are trained in a certain way by a certain person or group of people. And so if you want to see how that works and start to experiment with it, one thing I forgot to say, when you do go back and forth, there are variables you can always change to make the AI more creative, less creative, use more words, less words. So there are variables you can use to change back and forth when you're dealing with it, and there's different ways of interacting with it. You can interact with code, or you can interact through a chatbot. Just bear in mind there's different tools on top and the way they can be built. The easiest way to use that is through obviously ChatGPT or Gemini, because that's been the easiest interaction that people have had with it. And my biggest tip to get to understand that is not just to go to Gemini and say, can you do this? Can you not do this, for example? Is to go to it and ask it to behave like a certain person in a certain way and respond in a certain way, and spend a while working on almost closing out your own pocket of it. It's called single shot code. So you can write out, act as a CEO of a 100-person company that has this particular personality type and behaves like this and is likely to do this, and then start asking it questions and understand how it gets trained, and understand that, and you'll start to see how other tools are trained then, and get a vision of how that all works together, if that makes sense.
And that's where I've heard, a leader that I know used it to say, I want to send out an all company, here's what I want in it, here's my tone, here's the type of company, here's our website, here's 10 emails I've sent before, but craft the email so it's as engaging, as impactful as possible. So it is that input into, you know, as much as you're giving the machine the ability to know you, so it writes like you, versus, you know, somebody who would just say send an email to the whole company, which wouldn't fit with, you know, what you've sent out before probably.
But also be aware that if you go to Gemini and say act as a marketing consultant, effectively what it's doing is scraping Google. So what you will get is a very generic, in the same way if you ask it to write text, it will be very generic in the sort of things you can find on the internet. It probably won't be as accurate as an actual consultant who brings in with their level of experience and knowledge over time that they've developed. You don't get that side of it, so it's important to know where the pros and cons of that can be.
Yeah. And similarly, I had somebody, it was probably about 18 months ago when, or 12 to 18 months ago when sort of ChatGPT, the first generation, was coming out, and they said, oh, I asked it how to give feedback to somebody in my team. And my first reaction as doing the work that I do was like, oh, I think that's going to be a very human thing, that we learn how to give feedback. You know, we decide how we give feedback to someone on a team. But actually, as you know, what you've just talked about there, Chris, and you know what I've read is that we can get some really great information to help us, almost coach us on how to do it. But ultimately, it's us as the human, us as the manager, that then delivers that feedback, knowing the person that we're working with. But again, it's almost this, rather than starting with a blank page or maybe doing it in the wrong way, what information can we use to help us and improve the quality and the delivery of what we would do? So, you know, on that theme, is there anything that you would say managers keep as a completely them task and that they didn't use AI at all for?
I would be thinking experience in terms of teaching, coaching, working with people on this human to human side of things. So we all know that you can't read a book on entrepreneurship and expect to be on Dragon's Den next week. And that's probably how you should be thinking about this. If you're getting that information or interacting with the AI, it can only do as much as it can find. So whether it's been programmed by an individual or it's scraping the internet in what it can do, so just be aware that it may be able to give information, but that past experience, the nuance of how to do things and that feel, that can't do, and that's something that should already be maintained, that human to human connection. And that's the most important bit, and why, going full circle, why counselling is probably one of the most protected jobs going, because of that pure human to human connection element of it. And that's something I think we need to shift to. Talk about almost strategic thinking and operational thinking. So looking at that, we'll do more and more of that strategic thinking as time goes on, less and less of the operational piece. So just remembering that you need to get better at the strategic thinking side of it and keep that to yourselves.
So the humans keep the very human element, whether it's the experience or that strategic thinking. James, from your perspective, is there anything that you think actually should be a completely manager or leader owned activity?
I think, you know, as leader of a business, you know, you look for many different avenues of information, advice, opinions, you know, from people, from your colleagues, from friends, from customers, whoever it might be. And, you know, AI is another avenue of information and another piece of advice, isn't it? But it's up to us as business leaders of when we take that advice and when we take that content or when we take that direction and how we use it. And that's the secret to running a good business, knowing when you're going to take notice of someone and when you're actually going to go in a different direction. And I think it just gives us an extra dimension now, doesn't it? And it's up to us as business leaders to choose when we use some of that and how we use some of that. So I think that's one of the keys to the success.
I really like that analogy. We wouldn't automatically take advice from everybody that gave it to us. So why would we do that with AI then? So yeah, that's a lovely way of putting it. So the other aspect is the practical side of what we do, but then there's our growth and development as humans and as leaders here as well, and embracing sometimes this, you know, when we feel that we are incompetent in something. There's that phrase, isn't there, the ladder of learning. Are we unconsciously or consciously incompetent here? And this is where people might feel the tension and decide to, you know, stay where they are, or you know, not embrace that discomfort. So what would you say, you know, to help people really, you know, aid their, you know, maturity as a leader and manager? You know, what do you think would help you get past this point of you know, embracing that uncomfortableness if you're feeling that that you're at that place at the moment? Chris, what would you say?
I suppose we're talking about imposter syndrome.
A little bit there as well, yeah.
Yeah, looking at being in, are you confident about being in that place? For me, it's about communication with the people around you, understanding it's your team behind you. What you don't want to be doing is siloing yourself. So how are you opening up those communications with the team? You're not just sat on an AI tool, basically getting all your information one way and not questioning. I think, as James said, it's really important to open up the different information avenues and the different information pockets and see what you can get and talk with various people, keep that communication going. And I think, you know, you always need an area of vulnerability as a leader of imposter syndrome, as I said. But keep having trust in the team and moving forwards with the team, I think, is the most critical bit.
Yeah, yes, having that trust, showing that vulnerability of, you know, this is what I don't know, but this is how we're going to get there together, and a bit that change management stuff that you mentioned as well. James, from your perspective, what do you think is important in terms of, you know, the behaviours of leaders and how they grow around this?
It often comes down to change and how we manage that and how we embrace the change. But, you know, you can use many an analogy, can't you? But, you know, the 1,000-mile march started with a single step. Just make that first step. It's a long journey, as Chris has alluded to. We're at the very, very start of it overall anyway, from an AI point of view. But just speak to colleagues, speak to friends, speak to your suppliers. You know, where can I improve some processes? Where could I reduce some cost? How can I help my customers? You know, those are really easy questions that you could ask yourself from a business point of view, and then do a bit of research and see where that first step of AI could be that can help you solve some of those issues that you might be having in your business. You know, use it from a practical point of view. Yeah. So make it real, make it practical. And we've got a question come in about, you know, how do we choose between the tools to use? So, you know, there's many out there. All of the big sort of, you know, IT providers have a tool. There's Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, there's Gemini. You know, where do we start? That's the question that's in here. What do we go to first?
I would be beginning with the problem statement again. What is it you're trying to tackle in the first place? So when I spoke about that idea of the version of Gemini versus ChatGPT, in my view, Gemini is allowed to be more creative. So when you type things into ChatGPT, you tend to get very similar structured responses, but it's very good at handling data for that reason. So I almost see it a bit like the mathematical oriented person and the data oriented person, whereas Gemini is more creative, more the language sort of person, and more that natural way of communicating. So
how do we find that out as managers? What you've just described to us there, Chris, is this a resources, or is there any way you'd recommend to get that overview?
I think because of the exponential growth at the moment, it's hard to identify any singular source that will tell you what's out there. But I think correctly identifying the problems, and then there could be a multitude of solutions. So then looking at 2 or 3 that maybe help solve that solution, but looking at a problem solution rather than thinking I need to use every single AI tool that's out there and be in the predicament of the solution trying to find the problem. Yeah. I think it's about that, and don't expect to identify a problem and be able to go through every single solution on the market at the moment, because it's just far too difficult with the exponential growth that's going on in play, basically. Yeah. So identify a problem, do your background research into it, speak to a couple of people, engage a team within it. So get the education, but then, as James said, take the first steps on that journey, start experimenting and see what works and what doesn't. And I think as you use a couple of the tools, it becomes apparent what works and what doesn't work in different tools, and you'll begin to get a feel for how it all works and be able to move forward with it.
And I guess there's some of the more popular things now. If I'm thinking about people having AI note takers that you attach to virtual meetings, because there's so many, there are reviews out there, aren't there, in terms of usability and cost and quality. And if I think about, we've used tools to help us do interviews and type up the notes, and there's more of an idea there around the best product to use, but starting with, as you said, that what's the problem that you want to help solve and how does that align with your business. I'd probably also say as well, and I certainly found, I was doing research, looking for great resources, and this is a book that it's by a professor at Wharton who's a professor of innovation, so it comes from a place of, as we talked about, how do we make businesses better, how do we innovate, and talks about the use of AI. So this is Ethan Mollick's, called Co-Intelligence, and actually talks about, as a manager, what do you need to do, as a coach, as somebody who's a business owner. And there's probably also some thought leaders out there that you can follow on the likes of LinkedIn or Substack, people that are talking about this at a real level. Is there anybody that you'd recommend to follow, or to publications that you think, if people want to upskill themselves, that might be useful?
I think if you were looking for the main people to get information off in these areas, I'd be looking towards the CTOs of Google and of Microsoft. I'm following one. There's some really inspiring stories coming out of there, and they've been very good at being a bit more diverse in terms of their selection of who is at the helm in certain areas. Particularly, I'm trying to remember his name. I may have to send it out afterwards. It's a CTO of, I think it's Microsoft AI. That's really interesting. That's giving out some real good information on it. But there's plenty of webinars around on those sort of areas. That's what I've been looking towards for what's coming effectively.
Great, thank you. And James, anybody that you'd recommend following or reading?
Hey, I'm just a simple guy who runs a business that sells cruise holidays. Just get on Google, type in your problem, and do some research on there. Top 10 AI apps for process efficiency or something like that. Type it in and see what comes back. Just do some really basic research. Don't overcomplicate things. Find that problem. There'll be a solution out there for you.
Right, and we just had one come in the chat, Kevin Scott, so maybe have a look at that. But yeah, as James said, keep it simple, do what works for you. If you've got any other questions, please do pop them in the last couple of minutes, and we'll either follow them up here or after the webinar. But yeah, I think in terms of key themes that I've heard through our conversation today, it's about start with the business challenge, start with the thing that needs improving, what's the pain point, what's the customer experience that could be improved, rather than going to the newest, shiniest AI tool. Think about customer journeys and employee journeys and where there's opportunity. You look at what you want to try in terms of that, innovating, thinking differently, be creative, think about what can support you in that creative thinking, and then also about sharing information with AI tools. Only do what you'd be comfortable sharing if you were publicly speaking. We heard a lot in here about education, getting yourself up to speed, but also change management, supporting your teams with the change and with the vision of what's important at the end. So we will send this webinar out to everybody, and it's been great to have everyone join here. I'll just check if there's any final questions in here. We've got nothing in here new, so please do share with us any questions and your thoughts and reflections on this webinar, and I will share Chris and James's LinkedIn profiles as well when I send out the recording too. But thank you to both of you for being part of this conversation, and I'm sure if we were to chat again in a year's time, we would have moved forward quite significantly, so maybe we'll do that and check in with where we're at. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we will share with you the next CAPE conversation dates as well shortly too. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks everyone.